Hello everyone, and welcome back to another devlog on my airborne farming simulator. This time, I've been trying very hard to finalize and implement the minimum list of features I want to include before release. The problem is that I've actually had a surprising amount of difficulty determining exactly which features are necessary. Technically, the game's already a functional farming simulator, but I don't think there's nearly enough content to make it a particularly good one. So I definitely need more, but unlike action-focused games, where I find it easier to kind of intuit how many levels or enemies are needed, I found it nauseatingly difficult to try and do the same here. So to try and take a more deliberate approach, I reminded myself of what makes games fun in the first place. I think it's fair to say that, fundamentally, every game is a set of mechanics with consistent patterns you can learn to achieve some goal. Gameplay is most engaging when learning the necessary patterns is fairly challenging, but not too much that it's discouraging. For farming simulators, I think the main challenge comes from understanding and manipulating numerous complex item systems. So essentially, the features I need to implement are the ones that add just enough complexity to make it reasonably challenging to achieve your goals. Now this still isn't a super quantifiable goal, but it's infinitely better than just keep adding features until it feels right, since I actually have some criteria to work off of. With that in mind, I got back to work on my feature list. Interestingly, there's actually a lot of ways I can make the game more complex, some of which are significantly easier than the others. The most obvious way is just to make the existing systems more complex. This often works well, but also has a risk of just bloating the game without actually making it any more engaging. You could also just add completely new systems. This has a much better chance of going well, but it also takes a lot of effort to think of ideas and implement them. A much more efficient strategy is to change the way existing systems work to interconnect them as much as possible. This is usually very simple to do, but it adds a lot of complexity by making it so that when you're interacting with a system, you have to consider how your actions will affect not just that system, but also all of the connected ones. Another good strategy is to add additional goals for the player, so that they have to choose what to focus on. It's sort of like how in real life, the more things you want to accomplish, the more difficult it is to achieve any of them. One way I implemented these techniques is by expanding the system of Settarium Production, which refers to the set of machines that are used to make the Settarium floating in the air more valuable. As of the previous update, there was the compressor, which turns 10 Settarium into a chunk, and the enricher, which combines chunks with various powders. This time, I added a new machine called the bundler, which packages 4 chunks of the same type using either string, wrapping paper, or cardboard, to produce bundles of increasing value respectively. This machine adds complexity by making you consider if you should save up chunks to make bundles or sell them immediately. To bundle chunks, you also have to consider what material to use, and if it's worth it to use more valuable materials to bundle lower tier chunks. I could even add more complexity in the future by adding additional uses for the bundling materials outside of this system. Now, I was thinking of also adding a 4th machine called the cooker. It would have been used to heat up chunks to make them drier and more valuable, but if you left them in for too long, they would be ruined. I decided against adding it, mainly because it adds clutter without actually adding much complexity. There's no decisions to be made, it's just one more step in the chain. Plus, some item names are already quite long. We really don't need a wrapped cooked meteoric Settarium chunk bundle in the game. Next, I wanted to make the Settarium Collection system more complex, so I added a feature where the amount of Settarium being generated changes by the hour, and you can buy a monitoring tablet to see how the day is going to look. This means that certain times in the day are going to be much better for collection than others, and so you'll have to plan your day around it by collecting on the productive hours and engaging with other systems in the unproductive hours. This essentially connects the Settarium Collection system to everything else, since the time you decide to collect will naturally affect the time when you do the stuff other than collecting. To take it a step further, I'm also considering adding a mechanic where certain hotspots appear around your property, where Settarium generates at higher rates, tying into the island's development system, since by adding more land, you'll be more likely to access them. Now let's take a look at some entirely new systems I've added. I started with the scavenging system, which basically just means finding items by wandering around the world. For example, throughout the town there's now several berry bushes that you can collect berries from, which have a chance to regrow every day. It's a fairly simple mechanic, but it helps give the player more of a reason to leave their property when Settarium generation rates are low. Somewhat related is that there's now also a chance for grass patches and flowers to spawn on your property in the same way that meteorites do. This gives an additional incentive for developing your land, since the more land you have, the more chances there are for greenery to grow. I also added a new quest system, where NPCs might ask you to complete some task for them. Admittedly, it's very bare bones at the moment, but I think it has a lot of potential, since it's designed specifically to connect with other systems. For example, NPCs might request some string, which could prevent you from using it for bundling. They might also give you unique or valuable rewards in exchange, making it important to consider deeply whether it's worth it or not. One final change that's absurdly simple, yet I think is very effective, is that I changed the Settarium sell box to accept a much wider variety of items. You can now sell stuff like berries, meteorites, and even items that you probably wouldn't want to sell, like wrapping paper. It just adds a little bit of strategy by allowing you to decide if you don't need something anymore in exchange for a bit of extra money. In the future, I'm going to continue working on making the game more complex, and specifically finishing my feature list. I'm thinking that some of the current systems could use some more development, and I'll probably end up adding a few more new systems as well. I also haven't yet given the player any other goals besides making money, so that's definitely an area I want to look into more as well. But also, if any of you have interesting ideas about systems to add or develop, I'd really like to hear them, because I'm often quite impressed by how unique and thoughtful they are. Anyway, at the moment I'm actually feeling somewhat mixed. On one hand, I definitely feel like I'm getting closer to completion, and I'm happy with what I've accomplished, but it's obvious that there's still a lot of work to be done. I'm going to keep making progress, though I might spend less time exclusively working on this project so that I can take things a bit easier and have more opportunities to work on some other things. Thanks for watching. Bye.